Hey and welcome to Neverwinter with Aragon. So today is update day. We'll be having maintenance at these times, lasting for about 2 hours, and we can now see all the patch notes, the update details. There's a bunch of changes and some pretty big updates for Songblade and some improvements to Barbarian and unfortunately some nerfs to Wizard. First things first, some content environments. They just updated this achievement to be obtainable through Temple of the Spider Master. And then Spelljammer, just some updates on the Golden Path with those quest lines in these areas. But then we jump to Barbarian. They're getting some very nice improvements here, which is going to add up to about 10% overall damage gain. 5% through the update to Trample of the Fallen, and another 5% through the update of Overpenetration, which will now scale off critical strike and critical severity instead of power and accuracy, meaning you won't have to worry so much about, let's say, getting power capped out, which is probably not what you want to do when you run with a actual striker companion. You'll generally have it down under capped a bit, and you'll end up capping out that power when you're using, say, the tamed Velociraptor here to get all that power. But these improvements, particularly to Trample of the Fallen and Overpenetration, will be a neat damage buff. You will be wanting to use something like Punishing Charge to take advantage of Trample, because you need to cast a control power, and Overpenetration, just try and make sure that those stats are capped and you'll get that 10%. Otherwise, if you aren't capped, you will just use a very tiny amount, the way they've changed it to be scaling. Also, a pretty big improvement is the Rampage buff will now be removed immediately when Battle Rage ends with the Escalating Rage feat. That is very nice. It'll allow you to have a much more fluid combat style. Right now on the live server, you may be experiencing a bit of a delay, so when you finish the Rage with Escalating Rage effect, you weren't losing this buff up here as soon as you left the Rage, meaning you weren't able to get these stacks immediately again, which you now will. So you should be able to get those 5 stacks well before you even get enough Rage to enter. And I showcased all how to play Barbarian with these new changes in this video right here. Recommend checking it out, where Barbarian got some pretty massive improvements. And here's where I cover how to play it for multi-target, single target, showcasing what power setups I recommend and everything. There are some small updates here to barbed strikes. That'll be now 5% instead of 4%. So if you use that, that's a 10% stat boost there. Just be aware it does scale, however, on your stamina regen. So if you use a lot of stamina, that feat becomes kind of useless for you. And Bravery, this is very nice for just a flat out movement speed buff, and tanks will also get the flat out deflect buff, just regardless whether you're in combat or not now. But from there we move on to the Bard, and I've covered the majority of all the Bard changes in lots of separate videos. Again, I recommend following them here on my channel. You have wave 1 buffs there, then you end up with wave 2 and then wave 3, and we've had some more updates even coming here, and we finally are getting all of them on the live server, which I will say, if you've been following my updates, Bard's going to perform very powerfully. I will be making a video on how I say you should play Bard for maximum effect, and you should be able to, easily compete with the top classes right now on single target damage, that's for sure. You are, in my opinion, a little bit overtuned if you're in a fight where you don't have to, let's say, play so many mechanics. So let's just quickly cover the Bard changes here. You have got a bunch of feature updates that now will last 20 seconds versus 10 seconds, allowing you to basically have those buffs all the time, because you should be able to cast a song with the new performance rework every 15 seconds, so you can rely on these buffs to be active along with this feature. And that's also for the Minstrel, not just Songblade, so that's also a buff for them as well. Bit of an increase to the flesh damage there. Reprise been updated a little bit to have better animations. Dancing lights, pretty big improvement there, 300 magnitude, a massive cooldown reduction of 7 seconds. Lunge unfortunately did get a little bit nerfed, I feel. No longer has 2 charges, but it does have an 8-second cooldown, I guess. Mystifying Strikes completely reworked and will no longer perform at all like it did. The damage over time though has been updated, not that that is much a point because you'll generally trigger it immediately. Basically, when an ally attacks your target, you'll just deal 400 damage to them, and that ally can be your companion. Now, going to the Songblade, they did rework performance regen, so instead of having 8.5 per tick, you now get 20 per tick. But this is somewhat similar if you were using the Divine Muse effect on, like, say, these Dark Maidens headpiece or the new Starhide boots. Using those, there was a bug which ended up, having like 23 per tick. So Staccato got updated a little bit, magnitude increase, hit rate reduced a little bit. The Con Elemental variants of that at will all got updated. Their cast times are lower, damage is about the same. Conbrio, little range increase there. It's actually a very cool at will as you see here. Just a nice cone attack there with a sword. Then Contre was reworked a little bit. Slightly less action point regen, which is unfortunate, but improvised versions will no longer be reduced by our own critical avoidance. Will no longer hit twice, but they did go and basically double the magnitudes. So Contra Seconde changed to a knockdown, so you can use that more favorably in multi-target content. Contraceptime will have a knockback, which is now the single target attack power. And last power at the full charge, they decreased the charge time to just 2 seconds. Magnitudes on that have basically been doubled. Single target power is now a massive hit of 1200 magnitude, and the multi-target is 500 magnitude. For ad libitum, it will no longer hit twice as well, but they basically doubled the magnitude to 800. Now, it's still an encounter power that can hit 4 times, depending on a chance, so there's a bit of luck with that. You could get lots of hits during an artifact call, you could just get hit once. So your damage will vary depending on RNG still there, which might not be ideal. The lower daily power did get a massive increase, wherein it applies a 20% damage buff now, and that's added on top of the 10% you could gain if you have the right song active, and the 10% reduction to the enemy's critical avoidance, which is basically increases the crit severity of your attacks over the cap of the normal 90%. The Ado feat will now provide you and an ally up to 25 feet, just the flat 10% bonus there. Will depend on your roll, so for you it's 10% damage, a very good buff. Similarly with the Ballad feat, you can now also gain the bonus, not just your allies. Lore Master got pretty heavily reworked so that you can gain the battle research stacks as normal, but once you get 5 of them, you can activate lore or research, the same button, to get ready to exploit. And this gives you a 100% damage boost for 10 seconds to all your encounter powers and Ballad finales. You can read the text there, but it's a huge gain there. But Lore Master, from what I could test, is still underperforming compared to the Performer feat. It does have added burst damage because, again, getting 100% damage for 10 seconds on encounters is just massive for an artifact call. But the Performer feat, the improvised encounter powers, will no longer deal reduced damage. So you basically just get a free cast of an encounter power when that triggers. They did go and reduce the activation rate a little bit, and they did also go and reduce the grandstand stacks required down to 8. I just don't find it worth bothering with the grandstand encore, because you can just cast lore, buff the team, and buff yourself on top of that. Generally better, and redoublement feat should work properly. Now we go on to Rogue. Just a little bit of adjustment here, however it doesn't really fix the problem. What they did go and fix is that your smoke bomb will no longer give you extra bleed stacks when you cast it normally. You can see you'll still be stuck at 5. However, what they did not go and fix is if you go and cast it from Smoke Bomb, you can still get over 5. You can see 10 we got there. You basically get 5 Toxic Blade stacks per cast of Smoke Bomb. If you cast it within like 10 seconds again, you basically can get 15 Toxic Blade stacks just by yourself. So that's not fully fixed, and you can still get a lot of damage from that. So enjoy it while it lasts still. Until the next update, I guess. Now for wizards, unfortunately, you'll find, a lot of effectiveness has been reduced, particularly with Arcane Singularity. They don't mention it specifically here for Thaumaturge, but yes, a pretty massive reduction there. What they do say is Oppressive Force daily power being reduced a little bit, Arcanist Paragon Storm spell being reworked to no longer trigger from spells like Arcane Singularity, and then with Thaumaturge, the Critical Conflagration class feature. This is what's causing the big reduction to wizard damage, in particular for multi-target content. Now, your setup won't change for multi-target content. You'll still want to use Directed Flames, you'll still want to use Critical Conflagration. Just the big thing is, you'll no longer trigger Critical Conflagration on your Arcane Singularity, which means it will no longer trigger Glowing Flames as much as it did, and it will not trigger Enchanter's Hex more than once. Right now on the live server, you can trigger Enchanter's Hex 23 times on Arcane Singularity, and you get a ton of Glowing Flames damage. And you basically have a daily power which does about 3000 magnitude in this massive wide area. You might want to consider switching up daily power now to perhaps Ice Storm for just some instant damage in a massive area, because Arcane Singularity is not going to do at all what it did before. It's still going to group up enemies, but it won't deal any damage while doing it. So you'll miss out on a ton of damage, and the enemies could be dead before this actually does any damage with its hit. It's still really good for the grouping up, but perhaps other classes will take advantage of that more so than you will, because you'll no longer be dealing damage over time with it. But they did go and increase the target rate of Furious Immolation from 8 to 15, so that's an increase as well to its effect. It also groups up enemies, just doesn't deal as much damage though. Moving on from there, they now say they properly fixed the Shadow Demon's presence so that the defect severity will consistently be disabled on all characters. And then the Mount Insignia bonus, Enchanter's Hex, is getting reduced down to just 50 magnitude, as you may have seen, as I've mentioned in previous videos. So just 50, so it's a bit of a reduction to its damage. That'll mainly affect wizards and rogues, I believe. Other classes don't get as much from it. Now, the item power Divine Muse, that's been reworked, but that's only for DPS Paragons, and that's only for pretty much Songblade. So they'll no longer gain an insane amount of performance regen from that. And finally, with the Zen Market, the Playful Pink Yeti account Vanity Pet will now properly allow you to claim the Vanity Pet from the Rewards Reclaim agent, properly being account-wide, as it says in the tooltip. That is pretty much everything for today's update. Yep, some decent updates to Barbarian should improve its fluidity with escalating rage, and also just a base 10% increase if you're using Trample of the Fallen and Overpen. For the Bard, there's just some massive improvements across the board to damage, at least reliability. If you go to, let's say, Zariel or Tar the Mad Mage trial and you're running that a lot, yes, you will probably perform less than you did before because you were in those trials making a lot of use from Mystifying Strikes. We're still going to have Mirage weapons being busted as all hell on Bard. That has not been changed, so Bard is going to be super powerful in like Zemnich's Reliquary, Demon Web Hits, and Master Temple of the Spider with Mirage weapons. Expect them to get fixed though, so I don't know if you want to buy them or not. That's up to you. They're still going to deal like 20 to 30% of your damage, which is pretty nuts. Otherwise, yes, the wizard nerfs. You will not be as powerful in multi-target content as before. Single target to damage, you'll still be pretty good. You will want to use Ramfire Weaving in single target though, instead of Directed Flames. That's for sure. Once again, a massive thank you to all of these channel members for their added support, and we'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.